Okay, here we go with Hashem's help. We're continuing learning from the book Likuti Torah, which are essays that originated in discourses that were given by the first Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman. He also wrote the book, wrote the book, the Sefer, the Tanya, and the Shulchan Aruch Arav, famous law book encompassing most of the day-to-day laws that a Jew encounters in the course of his life, and of course the holidays and Shabbat. But here we have Likuti Torah, and before it Torah Or. These are explaining. Torah Or explains the first two books of the Torah, and Likuti Torah explains the last three books of the Torah. And now we're on the third. Right? There was 5 books of the Torah. Now we're on the third. And we're explaining here a little bit about the sacrifices, but also there's the holidays. There are holidays that occur in these times, and one of them, as we well know, is Passover, Pesach. Next Wednesday night will be Passover, Pesach. We'll see when classes start. Next week we'll understand a little bit better. I'll understand my schedule a little bit better, what's going to be. Okay, so we finished basically last time, the first 4 days of the week. We finished, with God's help, the idea what it means to eat, and how it is that the altar nowadays, it eats up the sacrifices, and the Kohanim also eat up the sacrifices, which is even a higher level of eating. What's the thing of eating? Eating is taking one dimension of life, animal or plant, and elevating it up to human. That's normal eating. And if it's done in the temple, it elevates it up to its source, to godliness, which reveals a tremendous good in the world, because God's creating everything. And that's pretty good. So we reveal that in the world, this creative force in the world, and even higher, we reveal that why is it here according to the Torah? Why is it here? We reveal the source of everything. So that's very wonderful. That's the idea of eating, and it says that all the eating that we do, even in the time of the temple and etc., in the future there's going to be new souls. That's like the idea of Moshiach, or the people, the souls that will come in the time of the Moshiach, and they'll be very high souls, and they will take all of these elevations that we elevated and elevate it even further. That's what it means. We will eat what was eaten, because there will be miracles, and you won't be ashamed anymore. What does it mean, won't be ashamed anymore? That now we are just receivers from God. God is giving us everything, and we're trying our best to return what we owe God. That's another meaning of doing tshuva. Tshuva means to return what we owe God. What do we owe God? Everything. He's creating us. He's enlivening us. He's providing for us. He protects us. He's a melech, ozer, Moshiach Mogen. He helps us. He protects us. He saves us from difficulties. Saves us from ourselves. Here, the Jews, he's been saving from the non-Jews and from our enemies for thousands of years. Incredible. So that's pretty good. How can we repay him for a thing like that? Well, we can't. We're ashamed. This is like the bride and the groom. The bride just receives. That's what it used to be. So the bride is ashamed. So now, but in the future, we're going to, when these new souls come, so they're going to reveal that we're really returning back God everything we owe him with interest. With interest. As yeah, so that's what really the Rebbe is doing here, to arouse our interest. It's a play on words, but it's the same thing, arouse our interest. Okay, here we go. So that's what we finished last time. Right? We finished talking about the idea of eating and how the sacrifices are eaten on the tabernacle, in the temple, and by the altar, and by the Kohanim. And by the Kohanim, and then in the future there's going to be even a higher level of eating. Good. Let me just see what this says. Maybe it says, what's this? I saw your Messages on Facebook, isn't that nice? I messaged him. Oh, I thought you messed with him. Good, okay, good. Now we're going to learn something else interesting. Ready? Here we go. Lahavin, to understand. Tahavin, to understand. Yes. Lahavin, to understand. By the way, this is the same camera. I learned my lesson yesterday. When the camera went off, it didn't work. Right? What's the lesson? Don't give up. This is the same exact camera as yesterday. For some reason, it's interrelationship with the sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Like every marriage, what are you going to do? Sometimes it's good. Lahavin, to understand, why is it the Yom Tov of Passover is B'Yom Shenaseh Anes, is the day that the miracle occurred. Right? When do we make Passover? The day that God revealed his essence, smote the firstborn, and took the Jews miraculously out of Egypt. That's the date, right? The 14th of Nisan was when the Jews got out of Egypt, the night of the 14th, and we got out 15th. That's it, we got out. That was when the miracle happened, which is not the case. The miracle of Chanukah and Purim, the miracle of Chanukah, Purim, was Yom HaMenucha. That was in the day after. See, how do I make this thing bigger? 1 minute, 1 minute. There we go. The day after the miracle. What happened on Chanukah? On Chanukah, they found the bottle of oil, and it lit for 8 days. And after that, right, on Kaf Hey, they rested. It says Kaf Hey v'Chanukah. Says that's why it's called Chanu. Chanu, they rested. And the Kaf Hey Chanu. Chanu, Kaf Hey. Chanukah is they rested on Kaf Hey is 25 in Hebrew. They rested on the 25. That's the day they rested. The same thing with Purim. It says V'nachu b'oy behem. They defeated all their enemies, and the day after they defeated their enemies, that's when they made the holiday of Purim. So Purim and Chanukah, which are of course rabbinical holidays, that happened after long after the Torah was given. So those are rabbinical holidays, Chanukah and Purim, and we celebrate them the day after the miracle happened, which was not the case on Passover and Shavuot, let's say. Anyway, Passover for sure. Passover was, we make it on the day of the miracle. The day of the miracle. Shavuot, the holiday of Shavuot, is really sort of, how do you say it, according to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is not necessarily connected to the day that the Torah was given. Because Shavuot is 7 weeks after Passover. We count 7 weeks after Passover. And if a person goes over, let's say, the international date line, so he can either lose or gain a day. So it could be that he celebrates the holiday of Shavuot when he finishes counting the Omer, 49 days, 50 days after he celebrated Passover. But in fact, the day that the Torah was given will be on a different day, either a day before or a day after, depending on which way it goes. Anyway, okay. Let's understand, let's understand, first of all, the idea of Memale and Soviv. What is Memale and Soviv? These are two ways that God interacts, if you want to call it, with the world. Right? God is creating the world all the time, but there's two ways that he creates the world. One way he creates the world, just creation, the fact that it is something from nothing. And the other is how he creates the world. Birds are different from fish are different from trees. Every fish is different from every other fish, right? If for no other reason that every fish is in a different place. There's thousands of stingrays and thousands, and each stingray is a little bit different than every other stingray, etc. That's called Mamali. Mamali is how God sort of articulates his light. And Soviv is just sort of the fact that everything is being created from nothing, which is an amazing miracle. Everything is an amazing miracle. But this is the fact that God can take nothing and make it into something. That's pretty amazing. The fact that he can take something and articulate it and form it, it's like if a person can, make up a vase from clay. If he does a good job, that's pretty good. But nobody can make clay from nothing. Right? You have to have water and earth or something. No, I created the water, I created the earth. You can't do that. Right? Well, God can, and God does. He does it all the time. That's called Soviv. In other words, Soviv is a power of godliness which permeates everything, because everything is being created, and it's totally beyond comprehension, which is not called the case Mamali Kolmim. Mamali Kolmim, that's like sort of miracles, if you want to call it. They're not totally beyond comprehension. Not totally beyond comprehension. Things exist, right? To the degree that all these scientists are all talking about, when did the world begin? But none of them talk about how it exists. Where does existence come from? That's in the hands of the philosophers, right? How it exists. You can't prove, there's no indication there's anything bringing the world into existence. No indication, even philosophical indication. Something's bringing the world into being. That's Soviv Kol Olmim, being. And Mamali Kol Olmim is how, what the form it takes. Okay. That's two types of light of God, Mamala and Soviv. Now, this is also two types of miracles, and we'll see. Mamala, this is the light and life force which is drawn from level to level. Olam HaNeshamas, first of all, there's worlds, there's all these different spirits, just like in the physical world, there's fish and there's animals and there's this. Also in the spiritual worlds, there's the world of Neshamas, below that is the world of angels, until it's drawn down into this physical world. Shari note it's known that this physical world, Makabala, receives me'ayin sarim. It says it receives from what's called the 70 chieftain angels. And these chieftain angels, they receive from higher angels which are above them, but like a human digestive system, right? You put the food in and it goes into your stomach, and then from the stomach gets refined. Some goes to your heart, to your brain, to your this and that's it. Until it gets to your brain, there's all these systems that it goes through. It goes through your whatchamacallit, your stomach and your intestines and the enzymes and all this, your blood, the blood system. The same thing as all the spiritual world for life force to come down. So it comes down all this, right, through all these levels. Oh, but the aspect of God, which called it surrounds all the worlds. This is the level of Orva Chaya She'eino Nimshach. It's not drawn level by level. Ella. Like I said, that's the power of creation. God creates. The miracle that the world of Atzilut, or these angels exist, is the exact same miracle as that a grain of sand exists. Something from nothing. Al derech ma, so similarly benefesh in the soul. Also in our soul, we have two types of life. One of them is drawn down from level to level, right? Like I just said, it says we're made in the image of God. From the form, from intellect comes into our emotions. Right, you get an idea, the idea that you get excited about it. Then from the emotions comes into thought, you think about it. Then from thought comes into speech. It says lower and lower. That's one type of light that comes from level to level. The second type of light, life force inside of us. The second type is Hameir al kulam ka'echad, that it shines on all of them together. Like willpower, for instance. Willpower affects your emotions, like it affects your intellect, like it affects this. Not in level to level. This is we can see when a person gets in his desire. That's like the Soviv Kol Olmim. When a person gets a desire in his brain, leave all to do something. Baraglo, for instance, with his foot. Azai tifola regal, then the foot moves immediately. Korega. You get these people into sport, boxers and like that. The piano players, right? The fingers move faster than a person can think. The music just moves their fingers. Mibilishi Isman, without any delay of time whatsoever. Right? You take a person, take a piano player, a person that's in the beginning, teaching himself how to play piano, right? He goes through the whole piece, he knows the piece 100%, but to get his fingers to move in the way, it takes some time. Right, and so he plays it very slowly. A piece that's supposed to be played, quickly, as he's playing it very slowly, because it takes time for him to get from his brain to his hands. But once it gets there, and then it moves faster than thought can move it. That's like the aspect of God, Mamali Kol Olmim, how God creates the details. It takes a certain amount of time until there's drawn down from thought, until it comes down from level to level until action. So necessary when the brain, it shines, not by means of this, but how can it be, for a person to move his hand, it takes tremendous effort and thought, but a person who's trained himself, so it can move immediately. Why? Because one is going according to thought, normally. That's corresponding to Mamalik Hom. And the other one goes according to will. As soon as he wants to, right? As soon as he sees the music, he has already the feeling of the beauty of it, whatever, it flows through his fingers. He doesn't have to think about it. So it is above, base meaning hashpah is two types of flow of life. Mamalik Homim, this is a type of godly life which reveals and is drawn down in an orderly way. Al Yadei Kativ, like it says, Al Zeh, on this it says, Malik Halaretz Kavodo. It says the whole world is filled with God's glory. I want to make it a little bit bigger over here. There we go. Can do is all right. That it says the world is filled with God's glory, not God's essence. Kavodo, God's glory. Kavodo, I know ziv, or like a ray of godliness. That's all the different worlds. There's more godliness revealed in the upper worlds than in the lower worlds. That's this mamalik hom, how God fills the worlds. But the aspect of God that's, so to speak, it's called surrounding the worlds, doesn't surround from the outside. It means it just defies all definition. It's not up and it's not down. The Soviv Kol Olmim, this she'eno mitgaleh mamash rak b'v'chinas chitzonius. It can only be revealed in an external way. You can sort of sense, you can think, maybe God, maybe I'm being created. Could it be? No one can possibly understand this. Of a low aliyah drug, it's not a level. It's not gradual. But kulam shavim kamei, everything is equal in front of God. Souls, angels, spiritual, physical, even evil. Like it says, the heavens and the earth I fill. I mahus atzma, not just God's glory, but God's essence, mahuto v'atzmuto, God's essence and his being, Yisbarech. Mole shamayim v'oretz, it fills the heavens and the earth, b'shava, equally, really. This is incomprehensible. That's incomprehensible. That God creates everything, right? And if so, God creates everything means that everything is created, right? Evil is a creation, good is a creation, and it's all equal by God. That was the whole thing with Haman, how evil can raise itself up in the world. How Haman could rule, right? Because he realized this. That's why it says he built his gallows 50 amos high. 50 is, number shows the 50th gate of understanding, which reaches higher than understanding. He realized that the fact that he can exist and that he is against everything that it says in the Torah, and he wants to make war against God's sons, the Jews. He wants to, and he succeeded. And he succeeded. And he realized that this came from a very high source. That's this idea of Soviv Kol Olmim. A lot of my morim also in Chassidut talk about God's essence, which is higher than both of them. But okay, well, that we're not talking about now. Okay, so here we have two aspects of God. One aspect is that everything is different. God creates everything differently. And the other aspect, that's called filling the world. And the other aspect of God is that everything is exactly the same. God creates the world. He creates everything. Everything is a miracle that's being created from nothing. Okay. So that, on one that says that I fill the world, that's God, because this is talking about God, right? God is conscious, God is cared. Okay. Now back to our question. Why is Passover? Why do we celebrate Passover on the day that the miracle occurred? And Chanukah and Purim we celebrate it after. The Passover, it says, Pesach Hashem ala patach. It says that God himself jumped over the openings of the houses of the Jews. Like the Jews put blood on their doors, on the inside of the door. They put blood, it was put on the inside of the door. And because of the merit of that, so God jumped over the houses of the Jews. Okay. The fact is that even if they didn't put the blood on the door, God says that even if there was a Jew in the houses of an Egyptian, which why he was in the house of an Egyptian the night of Passover, I don't know. But if it was, God would pass over him. In any case, God jumped over the openings. God jumped over. What does it mean he jumped over? Perish the miracle was al yadei, by means of hitgalut ha'ora bebechinas dilug, that God jumped. Shalom al yadei shtalshlus, the revelation of godliness was not in an orderly way. Mimadrega lamadrega. Hainu bechinas soviv kol olmim. God revealed this, what's called surrounding the worlds. God did not take the Jews out of Egypt because the Jews were like good guys, and the Jews, they did all these commandments. God took the Jews out of Egypt because he decided to. He just chose them. This is above understanding, beyond understanding. Well, that's called jumping. God jumped from the state that usually is called Soviv Kol Olmim, where he doesn't care about one thing or another. He creates rocks, and he creates, right, whatever it is, Stalin, and he creates the Jews, and he creates angels, he creates just creation. But this, he jumped from that level, not through all of the chain of creation from level to level. That's the level of surrounding all the worlds. Like it says, Va'avarti ani, I went, and not an angel. This is really what forced this level of Soviv Kol Olmim that surrounds the world. That's called God's essence. That's where God chose the Jews. Chose not for any logical reason. That's why the Jews can do all sorts of sins, and God doesn't reject them, because he didn't choose them for any reason. He just shows them. And so no matter how much they anger God, that's all the prophets, Isaiah and all of them. They're coming and they're telling, listen, Jews, what's wrong with you guys? You Jews, God is never going to leave you. God loves you. You're his sons, your children. Why are you making so much trouble for him? Here, look, you'll see him making trouble. Look, he's going to destroy the first temple to show you that he's angry. Destroy the second temple, put you in to show you that he loves you, but you're making him angry. Get your act together. But the fact is that God loves the Jews, and the reason that 4/5 of the Jews didn't get out of Egypt is because they didn't want to. They didn't want to leave. Okay, it says that the 4/5 died in the plague of darkness. So it says God himself, from this level of soul that surrounds all the worlds where there's no differences, suddenly he chose the Jews. It says that I, God, myself, and not an angel. The reason is that it has to be that way, and not like it was with Machana Sencheriv. Sencheriv, he made a siege, it says, on Jerusalem, Sencheriv, and and an angel came down and it smote all of the camp Sencheriv. Shene'emar, like it says, Vayetze Malach Hashem, the angel of God came, Vayach Machana Ashur, and it smote the camp of Assyria. And also with Sisro, it says that angels came down. God came down and he smote the whole. Ki Hashem Sham or Yarak Shlichus, this was only an angel. An angel came down. This is only just a messenger. God came down to do something that was already prepared. Tseu Pagabem, go and smite them, which was not the case in Egypt. In Egypt, it was a hard job. What was the hard job in Egypt? By these others, the camp of Sisro, the camp of Sennacherib, they were clearly defined. They had a camp. They were making war clearly against the Jews. There was one side against the other. But in Egypt, it wasn't so clear. Everything was mixed up. For instance, that night they left Egypt, so God smote the firstborn. Called Bechor, every firstborn. But Tzorech Havchana, and so God has to discern to know who was the firstborn to his father. It says that the women they had relations with the milkman, with the next door neighbor, with their own children, with everybody. They were all the whole thing was completely debauched over the Egypt. No, and so it was very hard to tell who was the firstborn. That there were sometimes in one house, it says when there was the firstborn, that suddenly 10 children would die. There were 20 children in the home, and 10 children would die. The father says, "What's going on over here? I thought you're the firstborn." He says, "I'm the firstborn from you," right? His wife says, "He was the firstborn from you, but this is the firstborn from the milkman, from that guy who does jogging every morning, and this is the firstborn from the mayor and from the tunas." Even b'chor la'im, even the firstborn from the mother also. Even if it's the firstborn from the mother, which we know who that is. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The firstborn from the mother, that's the first one that came out of her womb, right? Even if she had relations with other people, she had the first one. That's also hard to know. Why? Sha'ari me'em sha'ayuz kenim. There's a lot of them that is the firstborn of the mother, but she gave birth to him, let's say 50, 80 years ago. Maybe the mother has already passed away. An angel can't figure that out. So therefore, God himself had to come down and take the Jews out of Egypt. That's what it says in books. The reason is because an angel can't come down so low into a place of tumah. Like it says that Moses, when he wanted to pray to God, he had to go outside of the city because it was filled with idolatry and all sorts of other things. And so some people say, well, that's why God had to come down and take the Jews out of Egypt himself, because it was too defiled. Well, that's not right. Why? Shari Machana Ashur. Here we see the angel came and destroyed the camp of Assyria, and they were idolaters and decadent people as well. So we see that the reason that God came down, whatever the reason was, the fact is that God came, however it is, hatam, hakavana, whatever the reason is, it's the same thing. When God took the Jews out of Egypt, he revealed his essence. That's Soviv Kol Olmim, the aspect of God which usually surrounds, so to speak, and defies all definition. It's above revelation. So and there's this aspect of God which usually doesn't discern whatsoever between rocks and evil and good, just creates everything. All of a sudden made this big discerning. Only the Jews get out, and that aspect of God, the essence of God, took the Jews out. That it was not in a normal way, a higher level revealed itself in a lower level or something. No. So when God took the Jews out of Egypt, so to speak, he took the Jews out from his essence. The Im calls if so, Yuv and Akusha will understand our question. Why do we celebrate Passover on the day of the miracle? Kihine Yom Tov. What is Yom Tov? What does it mean, a holiday? Is it Inyan Hashos Kedusha? Tov means light. It's a day that a certain godly light is revealed. There can't be this revelation until Sheyavru Mitchila Chitzonius Amonim. There can't be revelation of good until all of the bad goes away. Like it says, Ubi'arte ara. Like Ubi'arta ara mikirbecha. It says that you have to get rid of evil things from you. It says that a person that convinces others to worship idols, idolatry, it says you have to kill that person, get rid of him, and get rid of the evil from you in order that there can be good. And therefore, Gabi Purim, and regarding Purim, Mitachilin, first of all, God killed all the enemies. Ayin Hey Elef, it says 75,000. Shohi Amalekim, that all of them were Amalek. The Shu Klipa Atzuma. Right? The decree was Haman said that all the Jews, Haman wanted to kill all the Jews. Haman was killed almost immediately after he made this decree. He was killed a few days after. He made the decree on the first day of Nisan, and he was killed on the 16th, 17th day of Nisan. A couple of weeks after, he was hung up with all of them. And then the king made a decree that all the Jews could fight back. So the Jews were still seriously outnumbered, but nevertheless, not everybody, right, was willing to fight against them. So it says that they killed, from those people that stood against them, the Jews killed 75,000. They had to get rid of the bad people first. Those people were like from Amalek. Like it says, Reishish Goyam Amalek, Achariso Ade Avid. It says, Machatimcha, you have to wipe out Amalek. That's it says the first thing that Moshiach is going to do. He's going to identify and rid Israel of Amalek, or maybe the whole world. That's the 10 sons of Haman. Then afterwards, also Yom Mishta, afterwards they could make we made the holiday. Happiness, rejoicing, sending gifts, revealing holiness. Al Darach Mashal, like for instance, so that was Purim. Same thing as Chanukah, right? That they, first of all, they had to defeat their enemies. Something like a king, when he has a dwelling place, he wants to move into a new castle. Azai, then, mitchila, first of all, tzorich lenakoso, you have to clean it out. Mikolatino, from all the dirt. Maybe the builders left, who knows what. V'lichluch, all the dirt and the filth that's there. And therefore, therefore, Purim and Chanukah were 2 days. One day was the day that they won the battle. They got rid of the bad. They cleaned out the house. And afterwards, afterwards was the revelation of godliness when we celebrate. Because the revelation in Purim and in Chanukah, that came from this aspect of Mamalikom and how God fills the world. This is gradual. In other words, a higher light of God revealed itself in a lower place, Shual Yadei Hadraga, like the angels. Angels are a higher world. They came down into the lower world, and they can get rid of the bad. But it can't be at once. You have to get rid of the bad first, and then the good comes. That was Purim and Chanukah. of all the miracle of Passover. That came from Soviv Kol Olmim. It came directly from God. It's not divided. Suddenly, all of a sudden, God shined at once to all of that one. At the same time, he smote the Egyptians and he released the Jews. There can be two things at once. Nagav Mitzrayim, smiting the firstborn of the Egyptians, Maka Bachoros, the plague of the firstborn, He's Galus Kedusha, and revealing holiness, Israel, to the Jewish people. Ad Shomer Hallel, and then they said they were saying Hallel, they were praising God at the same time. That what it says in the books, that it was before, one was before midnight. That God smote the Egyptians before midnight and was after midnight. This is not so. God smote the Egyptians at midnight and he took the Jews out at midnight. It was all at the same time. The revelation of godliness and the smiting of the Egyptians and the freeing of the Jews was at the exact same time. And we have to understand something, says the Rebbe, since the Soviv, the Shaviv, Mashve, this light of God, it says, is equal. Everything is equal. Evil is equal. Haman, Mordechai, right? They're all equal. The biggest, holiest tzaddik, Paro, and Moses are equal. Moses is equal to a pebble on the seashore, a piece of dirt. Everything is equal. It's just all creations. If before God is like darkness is like light, and it doesn't make any difference to God what you do or who you are, or if you go against the Torah, with the Torah, everything is equal. God's just creating everything. If so, how can it be that from then was drawn down that at the same time that there was a blessing to the Jews, there was a curse to the Egyptians? It should be a blessing, either a blessing to everybody. Everything is one. The answer is like this, according to what we said in Pri Eitz Chaim, a Kabbalah book. And when the explanation of Avadim Hayinu, it says that we were slaves to Paro in Egypt. That's how we start off the Agada of Passover, right? After you say the Kiddush, you start the Magid in the night of Passover. It says, Avadim Hayinu, we were all slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. What does it say in this Kabbalah book? Oh, I'm sorry. It says we were servants to Paro in Egypt, and God took us out. Yotzienu took us out. Hashem Elokeinu. Who took us out? Hashem, one name of God, and Elokeinu was another name of God. We say that in Shema Yisrael also. In Kabbalah books, this book Pri Eitz Chaim, it's written by a man called Chaim Vital, who was the prime pupil of the Arizal, Rav Yitzchak Luria. Rav Chaim Vital, he was the big main pupil of Yitzchak Luria. The one place that the Yitzchak Luria of the Arizal, he said, I only came to the world just to teach Rav Chaim Vital. He got it. He was the only one that got it right. In any case, he said, this book Pri Eitz Chaim, so it said this is the wisdom of the Arizal. The Arizal, this is like 400 years ago, something like that, the Arizal. He's buried in Tzfat, in Israel. And the Yotzienu Hashem Elokeinu, that God took us out of Egypt. So he says Kabbalistically, what's this Hashem Elokeinu? Av ve'em, Chachma and Bina, Shilbishu Bezurot, that it was put into the arms. The arms are the Chesed and Gevurah, love and fear of Erech Anpin. Erech Anpin is the lowest aspect of the crown. So he says, God's crown, so to speak, God's will, also has what's called 10 sfirot in it. The top aspect of God's will is called Av'em, Chachma Bina, and God, this was clothed in the lower part of God's will, which is called Erech Anpin, that's God's will, which is Chesed and Gevurah, God's love and fear. What does this mean? The Jewish people, their source comes from the inside of God, so to speak, God's crown. Like it says, Yoir Hashem Panav, God shines his inside out to you. Panav also means his face. But it's the same, it's in English, it's in Hebrew, it's what do they call it? A homonym? Homonym, the same word means two different things. Panim means inside and panim means face. God will shine his face on you, on the Jewish people. The Jewish people, they arose in God's essence. That's what it means. The Jewish people are the sons of God. Everyone else in the world is like God's good friend, God's best friend, whatever, God's creations, but the Jews are God's sons. That's what way God made the world. The Jewish people, they come from the inside. Mitzrayim, the Egyptians, and not just the Egyptians, with nothing against Egypt. I mean, the Egyptians, they ruled the whole world in that time. So the non-Jews, their source comes from what's called Acharayim, the back, Orif. That was Paro. Paro is the letter of Orif. The Orif means the back of the neck. It's the same letters as Orif. Well, the fee, and because it was concealed, Panim, because everything was concealed, the fish in there, like it says, Yosef that Joseph died. That's how the book of Exodus begins. Yosef died and all of his brothers. So therefore, Hashpa Nimshachas Mebechinas Acharayim, this usually the non-Jews, that they come what's called for the back of God, command the Shadak Batzur Kasfe, even the evil ones, they exist because it's like throwing over the back of your shoulder, right? Like is working for you. The boss's son is working for you, and he's an evil guy, and he never comes to work, and he wrecks things up, but you have to pay him because you got to be good with the boss. See, it's like you give it to him, but you're throwing over your shoulder. You're throwing it over your shoulder. Something evil exists in the world because God wants there to be free will. So he keeps it going, but he doesn't really want to. It's like throwing it over his shoulder. Avadi Mayino LaParo, we used to be servants to Paro. In the future, it says that all the evil people will turn to God. That everyone will receive, so to speak, from God's face, from God's inside. Hainu LaParo, we were servants to Paro, and the Jews were also receiving through Paro. The Jews became servants of Paro. That's the way God wanted it. What are you going to do? The Jews didn't do anything wrong. That's the way God wanted it. So it came out that paradoxically, the Jewish people, that they are, so to speak, from God's inside, they were receiving not from God, they were receiving, and not even like the non-Jews, like Paro, they were receiving from Paro, they were below him. But afterwards, as God took us out. What does it mean God took us out? All of a sudden, it says it's like God decided to activate the source of the Jews. This Ava'im, this Chachma and Bina, the inside of this crown, his willpower, Shehilbishu etc., that God decided he's going to shine his face. By means if this is drawn down, Itanu Sela, with us forever. I don't know if I can give an example of this, but I'm making this up, but I think it's a good example. Once in a while, they've realized. I saw that there was this black kid. He was maybe, I don't know, 6 years old or something. And then there's this blind girl that she's also has some neurological problem. Anyway, that they're like, they put them in a special home for kids, and they're blind, so they just, and they're not 100% the normal. All of a sudden, they sit them by a piano, and they start playing, and everything they hear, they play. And they play Chopin, and they play jazz, and they play, regular popular music and things like that. They're just playing. Nobody understands where is it coming from, and it's just amazing. They sit them down by the piano, and all of a sudden, these, little hands, and these little kids. All of a sudden, they're going all over the piano, playing this, Liszt and all sorts of stuff. Well, how did that happen? So the talent was there inside of them. They really were special, but it had to be revealed somehow or other. It had to come through the piano. So I'm making this up, okay? So I don't know if this is a good example, but it's the same thing with the Jews. The Jews, they're experts at God. They're supposed to reveal godliness in the world. But on the other hand, if the world is a world, and so it could be the Jews, their source is really from this thing of what's called the essence of God. Soviv Kol Olmim, the essence that surrounds all the world. Somehow or other from there, God chose them. But it can be that they're blind and that they're deaf. Somebody has to just all of a sudden wake them up. They sit them down. And that was the thing of Passover. God said, I'm giving you these commandments, right? You're going to slaughter the Pesach offering, and you're going to offer up to this, the matzah, and eat it in exactly that way. And all of a sudden, just like putting it in front of a piano, godliness comes out. In any case, that's what happened. And it revealed the essence of God. Afterwards, then it was revealed this inner talent, if you want to call it, this gift from God's crown, like the children with the inner gift that they had, that is drawn down, shining his face to the Jews, especially. Even though that this level of Soviv Kol Olmim, we just finished saying that everything is kulam amalim mitzad atzmom. Even though this aspect of God surrounds all the worlds, this aspect that everything is equal, mitzad atzmo, it says the kachashecha la'ora. We just finished saying that this aspect of Soviv Kol Olmim, everything is equal. That's why there can be a miracle at this and a smiting at the same time. But God can make this surrounding level of God shine through this, how God fills the worlds. Mina halal, that from the what's called the hollow place is drawn down the kav. Okay, in the beginning of creation, we say that God wanted there to be a world. So to speak, he removed all the revelation. That's like sort of Soviv Kol Olmim. Everything suddenly became equal. And then he shined down. This is not exactly right what I'm saying. But he drew down this beam of light. And the beam of light, it can be articulated. That's the beam of light. So God shines into the world, even though God surrounds everything, but God shines into the world through this beam. Like it says in the Bible, what does it say? God create the world. It doesn't say that, in the beginning, God created the world. That's it. Just created no, it says that God spoke. He said that there be light. That was the first day. There was the second day. So we see the essence of God, even though he could have created everything at one time. Indeed, he created time itself. But he unfolded it little by little. That's called the kav. That's called the beam. That's mamalikom, how God fills the world. So mitzadis labshus tuum, because God fills the worlds, like we say, chachma and bina, ilbishu, etc. Therefore, can be drawn down that God took us out of Egypt, the cherus. So God, so to speak, shined an aspect which is above nature, the source of creation, into the creation. And he revealed his essence in the creation. Okay, when we left Egypt, it wasn't in a permanent way. But eventually, this is going to be revealed in a permanent way. And that's the whole idea of the Moshiach. But on Passover, revealing this essence of God in an inarticulate way, something like we said, like these genius children, suddenly they reveal you have to have the piano there with the children. Here you have to have matzahs, you have to have actually commandments. And that's what we do on the night of Passover. We do these commandments, and one of the commandments is reciting, talking about going out of Egypt. And God willing, this year we'll talk about it, and it'll really happen. Mashiach will take all the Jews out of Egypt and the whole world out of all their confusion and depression and aggression and addictions and disappointments and wars, etc. God willing, this Passover for sure, hopefully before Passover, hopefully before this class even ends. Suddenly, and then
Amen.
And we'll have to announce it, and all that will be the ultimate level of transformation. All the media will actually say the truth. That I don't think there can be any bigger transformation than that. Okay, here we go. Let us now learn the Mar Malchut. Here we go.